Welcome to the Enchanted Ears podcast,
where we discuss anything and everything Disney.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Joe, and on today's episode, we have an interview with former Disney Imagineering President Bob Weis, who has a new book out.
Pretty cool get.
Yeah, who has a new book out. It's called Dream Chasing. It's all about his incredible career, over 40 years in themed entertainment. Started at Disney with Tokyo Disneyland, then worked all the way up to President of Imagineering. So we kind of get into his career, all about Imagineering with Bob. But it was a great interview, of great discussion. Bob was a really nice guy to talk with us. So
yeah,
really looking forward to everybody hearing it in a few minutes here.
Yeah, for sure. It's a fun one.
Before we get into that, though, I do want to cover some Disney news of the week. So over at Disneyland, Disney dropped a trailer, a little teaser that Paint the Night is going to be returning over there. So this is the Paint the Night parade. This was at Disney California Adventure. I assume that is where it is going to go whenever it returns. But this is something that hasn't been around, I think, since COVID. I'm not sure if it was if it went away before then or just with COVID and hasn't returned. But that would be great. So another nighttime show kind of coming back over at Disneyland over there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be really cool. I think that's one have we seen Paint the Night? I don't think
we
so.
have seen that one.
Yeah.
That was one we saw. Yeah, I think that's what I said. I think we saw it maybe 2018 or something. So that's what I'm not sure.
I feel like it was one of the first, if not the first time we went to Disneyland. The second time. We didn't know it was a special thing kind of at that point in time, but yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think it was our first time. So that's what I said. I think it was the 2017, 2018 when we saw it. So that's why I'm not sure when it went away after that, but it's returning. It was a great show. It's kind of like the Main Street electrical light parade. It's kind of the same, idea. It's at night, it's floats, they're all lit up, colors, a lot of music, just a lot of fun over at DCA. So really excited that is coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just like normal Disney magic, I mean, the Disney marketing department, that's where the real Disney magic is over there. Paint the Night, they return because the day before they drop, the Disneyland ticket prices are increasing overnight. So basically immediately went into effect. Disneyland ticket prices increased. Everybody was talking about that for, I feel a day. And then boom, they dropped that Paint the Night's coming back. And now that's all anybody can talk about. And everybody completely forgot that Disneyland costs a lot more money now than it did a few days ago. But it's about a 6% price increase on tickets. The highest tier individual day ticket is now $206. So it went from $194 to $206. So they've broken the $200 barrier, which a lot of people talk about that Disney's getting expensive. I kind of feel like $200 barrier is a psychological barrier that now, if I saw that as a ticket for one day, I'd be like, I think that's a little bit too much.
Right. Yeah, that's way
because that's not
much.
park hopping either. So if you want to park hop, you're going to add another $65 to $75 on top of that.
So that is the most expensive time of the year, probably around Christmas.
Yeah, that's your December holidays. But I mean, maybe I could see Disneyland being worth $200. I don't think there's any way I'm paying over $200 to go just to DCA for a day.
Not paying anywhere near.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Disneyland, I think that's crazy. But yeah, breaking that $200 barrier, that's a psychological barrier that now, I think now that we've broken that, I don't think there's anything stopping them from going up from there now.
Nothing can stop us now.
That's what they're saying. Annual passes, so the Magic Keys, they're increasing as well, between 6 and 20% increases on those. So 20%, that's pretty significant. So that's the Imagine Key. That went up from $500 to $600. So that's a 20% increase there. The Lightning Lane is now up as well. So if you pre-buy it, it's $32 a day now over at Disneyland for the Lightning Lane multi-pass. If you buy it day of, that fluctuates depending on how busy it is. So you're going to pay even more than that. So some pretty significant price increases, which was the big news again until Paint the Night came and it just magically went away and everybody moved on. But yeah, it feels significant, I think, because of the $200 price point. And again, that's the most expensive one. I mean, there's still I think there's 6 different tiers in terms of pricing. So there's a lot of options cheaper than that. And again, it's only like Christmas holidays, super busy times, but still that's a pretty crazy hurdle to break.
Yeah, that's I feel like it was JCPenney like years and years ago. They
What's the whole like
their
$9.99,
they
$19.99?
changed their pricing structure, and I don't think it worked out very well for them because they just made it an even 20, and then people were like, but it's it broke that barrier.
Yeah, they think it's more expensive. So we'll see how that goes, but I imagine Walt Disney World price increases are going to be coming soon. I mean, it's this time of year. They always kind of do the price increases. So I imagine we'll be hearing something.
New Apple Watches and Disney World price increases.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, that wraps up the news though for this week. So let's get into our interview with Bob Weis. We are happy to be joined by Bob Weis, whose new book, Dream Chasing, covers his incredible journey in Disney Imagineering, which saw him work on every Disney park and ultimately lead the group as president from 2016 through 2022. Bob, welcome to the show.
Angela and Joe, it's so nice to see you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for being on. Yeah. We see you have the book in the background. We have our copy right here.
Oh, thank you so much.
Recently came out, about halfway through it so far. A lot of great stories in here. One thing I thought was interesting, you start kind of early on, even before your career in Imagineering. You talk about in college that you started as a theater directing major kind of in school, and then you moved over to architecture and design. And I think that's a unique transition, but also something that I think is like perfectly suited for Imagineering, because you're taking design and storytelling and kind of combining it. So like, how do you feel that background helped you throughout your career?
Well, I'll tell you that I think that I can talk about me personally, but I can also talk about Imagineering in that a lot of people have come to Imagineering through theater. I think because of the combination of storytelling and design and process where you have lots of people, that do lots of different things, and everybody has to coordinate together, try to tell the same story, whether you're doing props or lighting or design or sound or music or anything like that. I think that they're really relevant to each other. Obviously, Imagineering's roots were from animation when Walt started it, but the more things became dimensional and place-oriented, I think a combination of animation, storytelling, and theater is really what it's about. I was very lucky because I started in theater. I kind of started thinking I had some skill in design, and I had an instructor who suggested I go to architecture school, and I really went to architecture school to really contribute to storytelling more than I did to become, like, let's say a more straightforward professional architect. But I did learn a lot, and it's good that I learned a lot because I came with a storytelling background from theater, but also the planning, problem solving, design side of architecture. So when I first got the opportunity to think about going to Imagineering, I had a good combination for not everybody has that combination. Some people come out of engineering, some people come out of mechanical engineering, from writing, from so many different disciplines, and many art disciplines. But for me, it worked as a good combination.
Yeah, is there like a typical Imagineer? Because I do feel like, I always probably previously thought it was somebody who was an engineer or something like that. But to your point, it is art, it's storytelling. Like there's so many different disciplines that can go into that. Is there a common, career path or education that somebody has, or is it really just kind of across the board?
Yeah, like if a kid was interested in becoming an Imagineer, what would you tell them?
I'd say, Angela, that first of all, it's an excellent question, and a lot of people are always asking, like, either for themselves or because they have kids that are interested in design and Imagineering. Even the most, what you might think of as the most rigorous engineer, let's say a mechanical engineer that might have come out of aerospace or a structural engineer from the building world or something like that, the ones that get attracted to Imagineering, I think, have a particularly creative sense of storytelling and if you want to be a professional engineer, it's probably more straightforward to go to a lot of places besides Imagineering.
Yeah.
Because Imagineering, you're going to deal with artists and designers and storytellers, and so you have to have. I think everybody who is attracted to Imagineering has a particular interest in people, in entertainment, in storytelling, and when I was there, and I think it's still the same. We used to say we had about 100 different disciplines, and that means that almost any profession that you both can think of probably has people that come in to Imagineering at one time or another. And so at any moment, I might be in a meeting, like I said, with a mechanical engineer who once worked in the space program, to an industrial engineer who plans big complex facilities, to a hotel person, a hotel designer, to an artist, to a stained glass expert. So many different kinds of expertise. And so what I encourage people who are interested is to say, what do you like to do? What do you think your unique skills are? And then learn as much as you can about that, but also learn about storytelling and learn about, experiences, try to do as many. You don't have to always go to Disney World. I mean, wherever you can go do experiences where you live and where your family lives, go experience things and write about them, draw them, write notes about them, and keep all your notes and things. And because the first thing that someone's going to ask you if you apply to Imagineering is, what do you have to show us? What ideas do you have? So, start by bringing in not so much your own ideas for parks or attractions and things like that, but things you've studied and things you like and things that you're interested in. Landscape architecture is a huge field for Imagineering. Sculpting, so many different kinds of artistry. People who are people who understand how swimming pools work. I mean, there are just so many different sides of it, really.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm a teacher for a living, so I'm always kind of looking at little
students have affinities, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because you're a teacher, you have to reach that student where they are, right? You have to try to find what their strength is, I assume.
Yeah, exactly. There's times where I struggle with, the kid that wants to doodle and being like, well, I want you paying attention, but also that could be something. So kind of like, I kind of pretend I don't see it sometimes.
I think that the challenge is, and I learned this from those years that I spent at Disney, is that people are so different. They process information differently. They process, some people are big visual learners. Some people are more reading learners or talking learners. And oftentimes you might dismiss somebody who seems like they don't fit into something, or they don't seem to be getting it or whatever. And then you find out later that they just processed it differently, And so I think that's the great strength of a creative profession or an innovative profession, is you're always looking for those people who are kind of standout talents, and you have to meet them where they are. You can't assume that they're all going to fit in exactly the same, because they're so different.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great piece of advice. So you started in 1980, and so you were a part of that second generation of Imagineers. How was it working with that first generation, kind of the ones that worked directly with Walt?
Yeah, I like to say we're the second generation. I think it's true, because the first generation I think of as those people who really were recruited by Walt himself, and they were brought in, a lot of them, most of them probably from animation, and so those of us that came in the early 80s, late 70s, we came in to work on Epcot, we came in to work on Tokyo Disneyland, and we were kids, and the people we worked with, if Disney, these people were the legends. Claude Coates designed Pirates of the Caribbean, among many other things. Ex Atencio, who was so involved in Pirates, and Haunted Mansion, and so many things. Bill Martin, who was a big designer of Disneyland. We worked with all these folks. Ward Kimball, who did so many things for Walt, including um, the space TV show, and worked on throughout Tomorrowland. Harriet Burns, who was an incredible designer. Um, it was just an incredible group of talented people. But as I look back, we didn't really treat them or think of them that way. We just thought of them as like just regular people, And the way people understand today how the parks work, who designs them, how they're put together, all that stuff is very different. At that time, um, it was all under the name of Disney, and it was we were all kind of really, really behind the scenes. It's only been recently, I think, probably since the Leslie Iwerks documentary on Disney Plus, the Imagineering story, that people have understood that there are people back behind the curtain that do this. But I think these folks were so generous with their time and their mentorship, and they helped us along if we didn't know what we were doing, which we didn't know most of the time. And so they were just great people, and we were just felt lucky to, and of course, during my time, a lot of these great folks retired, and it was kind of like we kind of learned more about their careers at their retirement parties, learning about all the things they had worked on.
Oh my gosh, wow. That's crazy.
Things that I had written as a kid that somebody Exitencio's office was next to mine. And I always loved the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, didn't he compose the music for that one too?
He composed. Well, he did much of the music. He did so much of the storyline, and he composed "Yo Ho Yo Ho," "Pirate's Life for Me." I mean, he did so many famous things, and he was just kind of a funny guy next door to me. Just like. Amazing.
He's just right there, and you didn't even know. Yeah.
See, I would never picture him that way because with like the X, I would be like, oh, he's like a mysterious man. So
no, he was just the funniest, the most accessible guy.
That's awesome.
And everybody had a wry sense of humor about everything. And Sam McKim, who worked on so many Disney projects, from Lincoln to it's countless, and was a child actor in Hollywood. Was an amazing illustrator. He was on the other side of me at one point in my office, and I used to just go over there and talk to him and look at his drawings, and it's just the most accessible, fun people, and relatively. I think because everybody was behind the scenes, it was kind of a quiet environment. It wasn't a big, loud environment. Everybody's kind of, reserved and introverted a little bit, so you had to seek people out.
Nice. Did you get any, like, whenever you were young in the business, I'm sure you got a ton of great advice from them. Does any piece of advice stand out? It's something that you remember and you're like, that was really pivotal to my career.
Well, I think the most important part of Imagineering, which we called WED at the time, was from the studio. When they worked in animation, they had these huge boards. They're 4 feet by 8 feet, and they would basically, in the animation business, you could hold about a scene on a board. So there were, if you did scene, sketches, several across the top, down, you'd fill the board with sketches, and they adapted literally the same boards. They're cork boards, 4 foot by 8 foot. They brought them over to Imagineering, and the offices were quite small. And so in the hallway is where the only place you could put all these boards, because you couldn't fit them in your office. And to get an attraction like Pirates of the Caribbean or something like that, you might have 20 boards, laying there, sitting there. And so we had what we called the hallway culture, because people would just walk up and your boards were there and they just start giving you notes. They just would say, oh, that's interesting, or maybe you should move that scene up to here and move this scene to here. I think because nobody was shy. Everybody was about just giving input to get to the right thing. Um, but I think that the fact that, and I do tell people this actually now, and I'm on Zoom all the time. You're on Zoom all the time. We all know that world. Um, but I encourage people to come back to the office, come back to the collaborative, table room with people, because you never know who you're going to run into, what they might, somebody just walks up to you and says, oh, I thought about you the other day. I was going to tell you about this idea. It's the unplanned kind of collaborative world like that is really important, I think, to the creative business.
Yeah. How did you maintain that? Because when you started, you first worked on Tokyo Disneyland, and you mentioned in the book how it was a pretty small team. Kind of everybody was on Epcot. There was a pretty small group over in Tokyo, and you even mentioned just that hallway culture. Whereas now, as you mentioned, Imagineering is huge. I imagine there's far more people there than were working when you started. Like how do you maintain that collaboration and that feedback when now you're spread across so many parks, so many different places across the world?
Well, it's interesting. Imagineering goes up and down, and always has. So I think at the peak of when I was in Tokyo and they were delivering Epcot, at that peak time, I think there were like 2,500 people at Imagineering, and it's gone up to higher than that, and it's gone way down to way below that. So it tends to fluctuate based on the actual workload that's going on at the moment. So it's gone up and down. It isn't like it's bigger today than it was back then. In fact, if you look at the sine wave, there's kind of a medium in there. But even so, you're right that as an organization gets bigger, you have to maintain a certain standard of creative license. You have to let people know that everybody's voice counts. You have to encourage people to accept different points of view. You can't just say it's my way or the highway. It's a very collaborative world. And today I think it's even more so, because we have people from Paris or from Germany or from Shanghai or from Tokyo, and so you have a lot of very differing points of view. And I live outside Los Angeles, and this is a very diverse place. We have many communities of different people, and we want all those people to feel welcome at Disneyland. So you have to have, here you have to have a lot of different artists with different points of view collaborating together. Paris is of course in the middle of Europe. You have multiple languages. Hong Kong, when they built Hong Kong we think of as kind of an English-speaking environment, but there's also people there from who speak Cantonese, who speak Mandarin. There's people who come in from Singapore and from throughout Southeast Asia. So every one of our parks has a very broad market, and so we've thought that it's really important that Imagineers be accepting of differing points of view, because that's who our market is, right? That's who our people are.
And how do you factor in like differing points of view if you're doing an international park versus a U.S. park, or even just in general determining like what properties are you going to use or IP in the next attraction? Like I have to imagine, it's a different set of kind of metrics on U.S. versus international, to your point, culture, but just what's popular, what's going to sell merch, those type of things.
It really shifts. It shifts back and forth. When I was starting work, when we were starting work on Shanghai, people said, well, the Chinese are not as connected to Disney, and the Chinese are never going to be as excited about Disney as the Japanese are. Tokyo Disneyland is just unusual.
It's such a great place.
The crazy Duffy craze, all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
But and you kind of, assume maybe they're right, but you don't know. And then I was just in Shanghai Disneyland several weeks ago, and it felt like Tokyo Disneyland to me.
Oh,
And,
wow.
culturally completely different, obviously, but in terms of the guest's passion for Disney feels as genuine and as powerful there now. Quite a few years later, 8 years later, whatever, when we built the park, it feels very different, much more passionate, much more excited. And they've been through up and downs. There were closed, open throughout COVID. So, and Paris, you read the history of Paris, that it wasn't really accepted at first, and now it's like the #1 tourism attraction in Europe. All the parks receive eventually their audience and a grounding of of their market, and then we always have Imagineers who are dedicated to that particular location, who get to know people, get to know the people who operate the park plus the guests, and it's really important. But I'll tell you one story. We had Kevin Rafferty and Sharita Carter, two really wonderful designers, developed Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and we worked on it for a long time, and we finally found a great location for it at the studio as an update to the Great Movie Ride, and built it there. And then when it was close to being completed, we really needed more attractions at Shanghai Disneyland, and people love the characters over there. We had built Mickey Avenue. We thought this is perfect to do, and it's so great. We can just take exactly the same attraction, and we can adapt it, and we can just build it in Shanghai. It's very fast. It'll get there fast. So as we were starting this, Zootopia opened in China, and Zootopia was the highest rated, highest attended animated film in history in China. And we just kind of looked at each other and said, should we be doing Mickey and Minnie's, Runaway Railroad, or should we say, what if we took the same kind of basic attraction idea, and instead we did it based on Zootopia, and it would allow us to do kind of a mini land based on Zootopia, and lots of enrichments to the park and things like that. So it just shifted, and we decided that Zootopia was a bigger priority for Shanghai. And you do that all the time. You sometimes you might say it's so international. Toy Story Midway Mania has been built in multiple parks, and it always works. Although its thematic context environmentally is different in the different parks, but the attraction itself is basically the same. And some things are quite different. It just changes. When we decided to do Pirates of the Caribbean for Shanghai, I said, the challenge here is that the people of China do not know Disneyland, and they don't know the pirates that we know. They know the movies. And so we have to figure out a way to do something that kind of captures that scale of those amazing films. And so we have to figure out a way that we can use a combination of physical sets and have more controllable boats and things like that. So each problem is a different way of thinking.
Yeah, that one's on my bucket list. I really, really, really want to get there to be able to ride the Shanghai Pirates.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. But it doesn't just randomly appear. It's like you think these things through. Mm-hmm. And we had some really wonderful advisors who were from Shanghai, who helped us, who we brought to Disneyland, and we showed attractions and we talked about things. So everything is a unique decision, and yet at the same time, I have to say that you will see things at Walt Disney World, Disneyland, or Paris, and Tokyo, and you're kind of surprised that there are some universal things about Disney storytelling that goes to the heart, and it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. Certain things that are just Disney and are just about, you know, togetherness and about optimism in the world and things like that. And so there are a lot of common themes, and there are a lot of things that work from place to place. I mean, the idea that we could all be out and, you know, late at night with our kids, you know, wanting to go to bed, and yet we all stay out and we see the big castle shows with, you know, animation and fireworks and music, and everybody ends up that much happier because they stayed. That seems to work anywhere in the world. So there's certain things that just work everywhere.
Yeah, there's even just a familiarity with the parks. So we've been to Paris and to Tokyo along with the U.S. parks, and even just the layout of the Disneyland Magic Kingdom park is similar enough that you kind of know where you are. You know, so even though there's maybe a language barrier, you can still kind of get around. To your point, there's that storytelling element that you can still understand that kind of transcends any sort of language, cultural barriers. Never really thought of it, but hearing you say that, like, you're right. Like, I kind of remember thinking that, oh, like, I know where this is or that. Like, it's almost a comfort, you know, even though you're in a completely different country.
I think that's one of the great things that you hope to do in a park layout, is to make it something that you don't have to think too much about where you are. You just enjoy it. You just are drawn, you know. In the original design of Disneyland, you know, Walt Disney and the designers tried to just say, we're going to draw you down Main Street to the castle, and then once you go through the castle, you'll be in Fantasyland, and then you'll be drawn into Tomorrowland, you'll be drawn into Frontierland by the river and the steamboat and things like that. You try to make the parks as self-navigating as possible, because you don't really want people reading the maps and, you know, trying to figure out where they want to go. You kind of want them to be able to just naturally go where they want to go and enjoy themselves, you know, enjoy the time together.
So speaking of, you know, Imagineering and being in the parks, as an Imagineer, what is it that you notice when you visit the parks?
You know, it's interesting that the last trip I took, which was this summer in August, I went to Hong Kong Disneyland for the first time in a very long time. So I got to see the new renovated castle, and I got to see Frozen, World of Frozen, and then I went to Shanghai and I got to see Zootopia the first time, and I realized I had been away from, you know, I've been writing the book and I've been doing other stuff, but I haven't been in the day-to-day of Imagineering for a couple of years now, and I was actually just able to enjoy it. I was like to just be a guest, you know, and I went with my family to Shanghai Disneyland, and I was actually with my associates in Hong Kong, but at Shanghai we were just hanging around, and I just enjoyed it. You know, I think when you're an Imagineer, you do have a very critical eye, and that you're looking for either what should we do next, or, you know, is something not working, or, you know, is there some opportunity here that we didn't think about that we could bring in next time, or, you know, I do think that as professional park designers or attraction designers, we're constantly looking, and so your mind doesn't really get shut off. It is fun to go, even if you're an Imagineer and you're working there. I think it is fun to go with guests, kids, families, you know, whatever, and just see it through their eyes, because you kind of do turn your rational mind, your critical mind off, and just say, wow, they really like it, they're really having fun, you know, people are laughing, or, you know, people are having, you know, being inspired or whatever. So it is fun if you can turn your critical mind off long enough. It's really helpful. One of the things that Walt Disney used to tell his Imagineers was to go to Disneyland once a week, and he said, just go there and sit on a bench and watch people and see how people imagine, you know, their daily life at Disneyland, because it's so important as Imagineers to understand that, and so we encourage that. Parks are always busy. It's harder and harder for us to like slip in, because it's, you know, it's not just like wait 100 years ago when I was starting at Imagineering, um, in the spring, in the early spring, Disneyland was closed Mondays and Tuesdays. We could all go down there and just walk the park, and that was amazing. It was fantastic. But it still is important for all Imagineers to see, not just to see the parks and the hotels, but it's also really important for us to see other things that people do, to see, other, where people go on their Sundays, other kinds of parks, other kinds of shopping and dining experiences. It's always really important to benchmark what's happening in the world, particularly when you go to a foreign location, outside the U.S., because you've got to understand what people do, and what does that tell you about what Disney should do, right?
One of the other kind of stories you talked about, you worked on Hollywood Studios, and you were part of the opening team with Hollywood Studios. And one of the things I thought was interesting is you talked about the focus groups you went to, and everybody was very excited about it. And then they were kind of told it's going to be half the price. It's a half-day park, and everybody was like, "No, we want a full park. We want everything." But ultimately with budget constraints and things like that, it worked out to be somewhat of a half-day park. Like, how have you dealt with that throughout your career? Because I think, like in writing, there's often the term of like write yourself into a corner, that kind of constraining yourself a little bit spurs creativity. And I imagine there's probably something like that too on the design of, hey, we want to do X, but we only have enough money for Y. And you're kind of, figuring out how to make that work. So how has that kind of gone through your career, and do you feel that's helped spur creativity, or it's like, no, we would prefer to have, the bigger budget and do everything?
Well, I think generally, constraints are just a way of helping your creative thinking. And it's not that you shouldn't try to, we always try to say you want to right size the budget for the thing, right? So, if you're going to make a huge investment in something, then it probably needs to have, then probably a lot of people need to be able to see it, right? So it's hard to make a huge investment in something if it has a very limited capacity and people can't see it, versus something that's pretty high capacity. So you try to match investment to the idea and to the capacity of it and its ability to really change people's day. If it really can have an appreciable, like, I'll go back to the idea of big nighttime shows and stuff like that. It's worth doing a great job and spending a lot of money on those kind of things, because everybody can see them. So it's and people have mounting expectations about what those experiences should be, but people do amazing things with smaller budgets too. People can. It should never be a constraint on your creative thinking. And sometimes you think, we're having a budget problem, we're going to have to cut something, and then oftentimes you cut something and you don't miss it, or you realize that the solution we came up with turned out to be better anyway. It's a crazy thing. It just, you enjoy the collaborative process, you enjoy trying new things, and whatever the budget is, you're going to do the best possible job for the guests and for the project. And it usually, sometimes there's been times where things were not as good as we liked, and yet we're not like a movie that comes out and has a bad weekend and disappears. The parks stay there for a long time. So we always go in, we enhance, we enrich, we modify, we see guest reaction, we change it. Today we have a lot more options because you can simulate a lot of things ahead of time better than we could in the old days. In the old days you had to sort of just trust that the models were good and the animation was going to be good, it was all going to work. Today we can see a lot of things more in advance. But even so, until you get real people there in the ride vehicle or in the audience, it's hard to really tell how it's going to work. So you always have to be flexible about the possibility that you might come in and do some enrichment enhancement later.
Mm-hmm. So do you build, like, to your point of testing it out beforehand, is that done like computer modeling? Are you building like small scale versions of the attractions to test them out and see what works, what doesn't work?
We still build models.
Okay.
We still do a lot of physical models. There's something still great about a physical model to because everybody can stand around it and see the same thing, right? You're all, able to see things. But we do a lot more computer like fly-throughs, both fly-throughs of parks and park, lands, environments, things like that. But also of attractions, Pirates of the Caribbean you mentioned for Shanghai. It would be impossible, I would say, to do that attraction before we had the kind of computer modeling we have now, because you could follow the guest's point of view through the vehicle, the projections, the physical elements, the timing of the vehicle. All those things are really hard to work out ahead of time if you didn't have computer modeling. So almost everything today is done that way. But a lot of things still, you don't know quite how the audience is going to react. And especially in live entertainment situations. I mean, you mentioned going to see Star Cruiser. Star Cruiser is was very, very technically adept experience, but it was also theater. So, you had to, they spent a lot of time rehearsing and working that way, and they couldn't really tell exactly how it was all going to work until they rehearsed it all with guests. And so it's both. I think the technology helps you, but also there's a certain amount of just testing it out with real people.
So with new ride systems, like we've mentioned the Shanghai Pirates a few times, even like the trackless ride vehicles, or like something like Rise of the Resistance, where there's a lot going on, is like the R&D that Imagineer is doing. Are you kind of figuring out these ride systems and then trying to find a property for them to work on, or are you going, hey, we need to do a new ride system for Pirates of the Caribbean, and then you're kind of developing something? Like how does that process work?
I think I hate to keep saying both, but I think it can be both. It could be that you're studying virtual reality or something like that, and that that there's something there, but you don't know how you're going to use it yet. But at the same time, you can have something like Pirates, where you really do know that you want to have boats floating in water, but you want to be able to sink them completely so that they point guests in the direction that you want them to point in. I'd say technology is more often than not accelerated by a need. So if you need to do Pirates, you probably are going to develop a boat ride to do it, a boat system to do it. The other things you tend to do long-term R&D on, they accelerate when you suddenly decide, okay, we want it. Once you decide. So I'd use Stuntronics as a good example. The R&D folks thought it'd be great to be able to throw an animated figure through the air, completely untethered, and have it be able to perform like a gymnast or an acrobat, and that it had to think, it had to be able to, feel the wind, it had to be able to pull its legs, had to be able to turn, do somersaults and flips and things like that. That was, a couple years of development, and a lot was invested. But once it was decided that it was going to Disneyland Resort, it was going to be Spider-Man, and it was going to be part of, the Adventures campus, it adds that much more speed and agility to, okay, now you have a deadline, and now we're going to really get it done, and now we're going to get mock-ups done, and we're going to get the park involved, and things like that. So there's an incredible importance to pure R&D and pure creative thinking, and there's also a great thing about just when you decide we're going to do this, and then everybody gets behind it, and it kind of causes everything to move forward faster.
Yeah, was there something that you worked on, because you've been in Imagineering, you've had an incredibly long career, that technologically you wanted to do decades ago, but just the technology wasn't ready yet, and you finally were able to kind of get it accomplished?
Or it was shelved and you never got to do it, and you're like, now would be the time.
Yeah, I think there, it always goes back to storytelling, and like I said, with Pirates, it was we wanted to accomplish something, and in order to accomplish that, we had to do it differently. Tron was the same way. The idea was, we knew that Space Mountain was popular. We knew it was exciting, but we also knew a second Tron movie was coming out, and we knew that this light cycle experience was something that people would love to experience, and we didn't know how to do it. We didn't know how to do it because we didn't want people to have any kind of vehicle around them. We wanted them to just feel like they were, in the air on the equivalent of kind of a cycle or a motorcycle. And so you go through a lot of R&D, and there are times along the way where you kind of say, well, it'd be a lot easier to just go back and not do this. And luckily the kind of the ethics of Disney and Imagineering are, we don't shy away from taking creative challenges on.
It's that idea of yet. I don't know if you've ever heard that. You always tell people, it's not I can't do it, it's I can't do it yet. Like, you're pushing yourself forward.
I can't do it yet. Yeah, exactly right. Or why not? What there's an old expression about Imagineering, which is, how many Imagineers does it take to screw on a light bulb? And the answer is, why does it have to be a light bulb? There's always a pursuit of something, and there's sometimes that it makes sense to take on a big creative challenge, and then there's times when you say, we should do a classic thing here. They're both valid. But if you don't keep moving forward, if you don't, we had a lot of challenges, which I write about in Dream Chasing in my book. We write about the Tower of Terror, Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, and how to do that, how to create that sense that you're in an elevator really falling. And it took a long time to figure out how to do that from a ride system point of view. But in the end, it delivered something that people still ride, and they ride it, now with Guardians of the Galaxy and two different Tower of Terrors, one in Tokyo and one in Florida.
It's Angela's
I was just going to say, it's one of my favorite rides for a while. Yeah, it's something about it. It's like the terror of it. I mean, it puts your heart up in your throat.
It was hard to do. And it was hard to do. And it was there's probably lots of ways to do it that were more straightforward, but they might not have given you that real sense of out of control that first 2 seconds when you're really dropping. That's a sensation that we all kind of, for some reason, we like to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for continuing to work on that one, because that is definitely, I don't know. It's just, it's unique. I feel like
that one, for me personally, if you asked me, I think that and Pirates and Tron and those things where it's a combination of, I think, good storytelling, but also they were hard to do. They were hard, it was you had to really stick by your original notion, not to be inflexible, but you had to really try hard to make it work. Those are fun. Those are very. It's fun to go back and see them again, years later, and say, "Wow, it still works."
So out of those three, which one's your favorite child? Can you pick?
I don't have a favorite child. I'd say my favorites are the ones that I didn't work on. I love, I wrote a book. I don't know if they tell you. I wrote a book that's inspired by the Haunted Mansion, because the Haunted Mansion is something that I did not work on. Obviously, it was before my time, and it was like, this is a perfect attraction. This is the most perfect attraction. I'll never be able to work on something this good. And then I said, well, I could write a book about it. At least that. It's Haunted Mansion is incredible. Pirates is incredible. Original Pirates is incredible. Just the, New Orleans Square at Disneyland. Standing there on the edge of the river with the riverboat going by, and it's just, there's so many great things that I didn't work on that are my favorites too.
So I was going to ask kind of about, you Imagineering being a very like public position, and you kind of mentioned when you started, it really wasn't. It was kind of, nobody really knew there were people behind the scenes. That's obviously a more recent thing. But I do feel like recently, probably within the past decade, at least the Disney fandom is more aware of, these are the Imagineers, these are the people building the attractions, which I think has positives, but then also the negatives of people complaining, oh, why'd you do this versus that? How has that transition been like through your career of, you're kind of the person behind the scenes that, again, maybe nobody really knows somebody's back there, to now you're kind of in the public eye and you have millions of people sometimes kind of scrutinizing, you pick this ride versus that IP, or you made this change versus that change?
Well, I think it's great that you hear that people notice, right? Mm-hmm. It's great to know that there are, from the standpoint of fans of the parks, it's great to know there are people who notice these things and who love the parks, and it's very gratifying because we don't do it for ourselves, and you got to be very careful that you don't do it for yourself. You're doing it for the audience. And so it's just great to think of, there are people out there who are probably, I remember when we were making a bunch of changes to Disney California Adventure, and we decided, I said, I think we should do a preview center. I think we should do a bunch of models, and we should show people what we're going to do, and we should be very open. We should not be secretive, because the Disneyland audience is very sophisticated. They know everything about Disneyland. They know everything that happens in every restaurant, on every menu, in every shop, everything. So we have to be more communicative and open. And I think that's part of what it is. I think there's a sense of stewardship over the parks, that we are not necessarily just do whatever we want. We have to take into consideration the history, the background, the guests, there's so many things. And I like to tell this thought about that there's a story about that they moved a park bench at Disneyland, and that they got a bunch of letters from people saying, you can't move that park bench because it's just something happened, like my grandparents got engaged on that park bench, or whatever. My goodness. That people have now been going to parks for multiple decades, and the parks, they really have their own ownership over the park experience. And so you have this balance of pushing forward and at the same time respecting the tradition. You have to do both. You can't just leave it the way it is. It's not, as Marty Sklar once said at a D23 event, you can't make them into museums that just preserve the history of Disneyland. We have to move forward, but you've got to respect the history too. So that's a balance that I think every Imagineer tries to take on. And you try to make improvements. When we came in to redo uh, uh, Toontown at Disneyland, I said, I think we need a lot more for young families. The park was saying we need a lot more for young families, and so I said, I think we need a lot more like grass, places for kids to run. We need, Disneyland needs more open area. It's very, there's lots of people who have young kids have specific needs. So there's a lot about Toontown that we didn't want to change, but that at the same time we had to sort of say, what is the modern audience asking for, and what are parents asking for, and so it's always a balance of those factors.
So I feel like you started to kind of go into this next question, but what is the most challenging project that you've been a part of and why? And then what lessons did you learn from that experience that maybe is common practice now for Imagineers?
Well, there's two kinds of challenge, I'd say. Shanghai Disneyland was a challenge because it was completely new audience, completely new location for Disney, 7 square kilometers, massive, new development with train lines and hotels and a lake and a park and just that's a new audience. So things like Pirates and Tron and things like that. So that's a challenge of just like a massive scale. It's like when the people did Disneyland Paris or whatever. It's just a massive scale of shift of doing something that starts out as like a bean field and 7 years later is a huge park and a resort, right? So that's a challenge. But I think an equal challenge is going into something like Disney California Adventure, or right now we're finishing up a huge amount of work at Disney Hollywood Studios in Paris, where there's something that is kind of there, but it doesn't feel like it's working at its optimum, that we could do a lot more. And so there it's like a painting that's like half finished. And so it's just as hard to come into a half finished painting as it is to come into a blank piece of paper. I think it's equally challenging, and you have to sort of evaluate what's working and what's not working, and what should we keep and what should we change. They're both exciting challenges. I don't mean to say they're negative challenges. They're both challenges, but they're both very different in the challenge.
You were talking about Shanghai, so that is a park that you were part of building when it opened. Tokyo Disneyland, Hollywood Studios. You're kind of there from the building through the opening. What is that feeling like to see something like you said, it was a bean field 7 years ago, and now there's a park. It's finally open. People can finally see it. I mean, I'd have to imagine it feels like so satisfying, and there's probably like nothing else like it out there.
Your first reaction, I think, is just kind of like, whew, we never thought we'd get there. Because they're so big and complicated and hard to do. And then your second thing is, you don't really know until it's open how people are going to react. And then you have to sort of say, what should we do next? And how should this park grow? And now you have a much freer hand before the park is open. Once the park is open, you are still very creatively involved, but now it's got thousands of guests in it every day. It's open every day. It's open till midnight. It's not as easy to just go in and change stuff. So now you have to be very deliberate about your planning process, and you have to work closely with the resort, because the resort has their opinions about what they need. So it becomes a more thoughtful, an even more thoughtful, difficult part of the experience to work once a park is open. But we still, I think the good thing about Disney is there's always still a desire to make things better. And so there's a kind of even though it's working okay as it is, we have an expression that we call just new magic, which is even when you do a routine renovation, or a routine, what we would call a rehab, which is like you do Small World and you're going to take it down for a couple months and, plus all the figures and do all the maintenance and all that stuff. But we always look for opportunities for new magic. Is there something new we can do? So not only will it reopen prettier and fresher than it was a couple months ago, but there's things that guests will never have seen before. So it's nice to do both. Or you add more music, or you add another figure, or you do something that gives it an extra glow. And actually, when we were ready to, when we were finishing Cars Land at DCA, we were finishing Cars Land. We had redone the main entrance, Buena Vista Street. We had done so much in the park, and then the park group, the maintenance group, the park operating group said, we're going to put money together and we're just going to sparkle everything. And so anything that we didn't touch, they went through and they repainted, refreshed colors, because they said, well, we want the whole park to look, new. And we went in and planted 1,200 trees. We're always looking to just like keep going forward, keep trying to make it better.
Wow.
That's incredible. So what is something that you maybe worked on and that you wish you could have made a reality, but maybe didn't quite get there, or you had to pivot or something?
You tend to, like something like Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, you come in with everything, the kitchen sink, everything you could possibly think of. And then you have to prioritize, and you have to say, look, if we're going to do Rise of the Resistance, that is a highly elaborate, big technological, creative challenge. Let's focus the energy there. Let's focus the energy on the Millennium Falcon, and let's assume that we're going to, once the land is there, we're going to keep adding to it over time. And that's the way Walt worked too, right?
Mm-hmm.
He kept adding, he kept changing Disneyland even in his lifetime. So I'm not sure that I would point to anything and just sort of say, well, I wish we had done that. Because you kind of are satisfied that you got to where you wanted to go, and then you want to do more there. And you pretty much always get the chance to do more. You pretty much always get a chance to come in and do additional things, because if the guest success is what you hoped for, then they're going to want more to do, and you've got to keep it fresh.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you kind of made the analogy earlier, like you're not a movie that, once it's out, and then it's gone. It's like you said, you can come back and you can change it. Right.
You can tweak. We keep adding, and we keep. Eventually, you have to stop during the development process, and you have to say, this is locked for now. We have an expression which I hate, which we all hate, called pencils down, meaning stop designing. We got to go build it. But then you pick it up again, right? Then once it's there, then you can say, okay, now it's there. Let's pick it up again.
How do you know when to stop? Like, I feel like that would be very easy to just keep going, like just keep tweaking, and it would be hard to kind of.
It is easy to keep tweaking, but the farther down the production process you are, the more people are involved, and there's lots of people, there's lots of contractors, there's lots of subcontractors, there's people trying to train people. There's so many things that have to happen to open an attraction that at some point everybody just has to get on board and say, okay, this is what we're opening, and let's get what we know to be the case now open, and then we'll make adjustments. And you can always make adjustments after. So you just have to. And it's kind of selfish for Imagineers. we do everything what we call field art direction. You'll change the color, you'll change the, you'll adjust the lighting, adjust the sound, adjust the music, things like that. But you can't really pretend you're directing a movie and it's just about you and the editor, because there's too many people involved. There's just, there's employees, there's, people getting trained. There's just so many different things that have to happen. So we all cooperate, we all get together, we all know how hard it is. And then we all know that we'll all look about it, talk about it afterwards and say, can we adjust this later? Or, make those things different.
What's the average kind of time it takes to develop an attraction from kind of initial idea to when you open? I know it's going to vary too, depending on how complex it is. But I mean, is that what's that process?
It varies a lot. I'd say it varies a lot. I worked on Shanghai Disneyland for 7 years.
Oh wow! Okay.
Wow. That's a big chunk of your life, but that's a whole park, resort, everything. I would say I think that the team that worked on Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, they were probably committed to the first phase of that project for about 4 years, I'd say.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'd say generally speaking, if it's a brand new ride, show, but primarily anything that has ride elements and significant new technologies in it, it's probably, at least a 3 or 4 year process. If it's a repeat of something, if it's a taking Tron from Shanghai and bringing it to the US, that's a lot more straightforward, because at least creatively what it is, technically what it is. Now you have to adjust it to Florida building codes and Walt Disney World's needs and things like that. But
never thought about the building codes. That's so interesting.
And generally speaking, Disney is the standard. So the governing standard is usually Disney safety and Disney, maintenance standards and things like that. So so we're usually the final decision maker, but even so, it's different to build in Florida than it is to build in California and that kind of thing. But each project is different. The more complex it is and the more difficult, the more you're looking at, multiple years of development to get there.
Get you out of here on this question, because we mentioned the Galactic Star Cruiser. After Imagineering, you spent a little bit of time at Gessler and their immersive experience design department, and the Galactic Star Cruiser was something that was unlike anything that had ever been done kind of in themed entertainment before in the level of immersion. Like, where do you see the future of themed entertainment? Do you feel that it's more immersive experiences, or is it virtual reality, augmented reality? Like, where do you think we're going to be in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think, as always, people want the newest, coolest technology. They want to, I think today, more of us are apt to want to control some of the experience. We want to have something to say about the story ourselves and have it be more customized. There's a great deal of customization to experiences today. But I think there's a certain amount of old-fashioned, just like, I just want to go to Disneyland too. I want to see the fireworks show. So we're always upping the ante from a technological point of view. No question about it, and being more immersive. A lot of what I think my interest in Gensler was the fact that post-COVID, so many places in our cities had gone vacant, and from places where people live and shop and go for entertainment, things like that. And so I think there's a desire to bring vitalization back to cities. Most cities require more downtown revitalization. They require more places for people to work and eat and new kinds of entertainment. And so I think we're going to still see a desire to do things at home without having to get on a plane or drive, a couple days to get to a resort. So I think that's a big factor. I think just, having things that are immersive, that are close to home, that are changeable, that you can do. So I think it's all those things. But I don't think there's a new technology versus an old technology. I think that it's a combination of all those things. And magic is magic, and people do desire to see new magic, but they're not necessarily attached to how it's done. They're really more about, like, can you make me believe something I can't believe I saw that, no matter how you did it, no matter how low tech or high tech it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It kind of all
so
just goes back to that
interesting,
storytelling, like you said. Like
Yeah.
it just.
Yeah, it's still about storytelling. It's still about people together. It's still about people enjoying time together, being inspired, having a whole day to just kind of forget about the troubles in the world and just enjoy life a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Bob, really appreciate you being on the
This
show
has been
again.
really
The book
interesting.
is Dream Chasing. It is out now. You mentioned you have another book about the Haunted Mansion. Is that out now as well?
Dream Chasing is out now, and I hope people will take a look at it. It's really about the fact that you've got to trace your dreams. You can't just kind of expect them to happen. And this goes for anything in life. You've got an idea, chase after it. And in the case of complicated projects, you got to get a lot of people to go with you. So you got to really chase after them. And the other book is called. Do I have it here? I don't have it handy. The other book is called Ghost Dog, and it's a fiction book, and it's based on the Haunted Mansion.
That's cool.
Here it is. And for those of you that the Haunted Mansion, and that at the end of the Haunted Mansion, a ghost will follow you home.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, in this case, a family rides a Haunted Mansion, and a ghost dog follows them home.
Oh, amazing. The best kind of
It's
ghost,
a story,
maybe.
right? So it's a story about a family that suddenly finds out they're at home, and they've got a ghost dog living in the house with them. So that's that one, and that comes out October 15th.
Awesome.
Oh, that's so
Perfect for
exciting.
Halloween, so
Yes,
perfect.
I can't wait.
Just in time for Halloween.
Well, perfect. Well,
Amazing.
Thank you again, Bob. We really appreciated it.
Yeah, we did.
Take care. So nice to meet you both, and thanks so much for the time.
So I want to thank Bob Weis again for taking the time to sit down with us, talk about his incredible career. I have the book here again. It is called Dream Chasing. It is out now. We'll put a link in the description if anybody is interested in buying this. A great read as well. I mean, so much more about his career. Bob gets into it here. We kind of just touched on the surface of a few things in the interview. So if any of it sounded interesting, be sure to get this book. It's a great read. But that wraps up the show for this week. I want to thank everybody again for listening. If you've not done so, please leave us a rating or a review. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for letting us your ears.
Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you here next Monday.
Bye-bye.